Welcome. As promised, this is my video about making omelets. Before we begin, I did want to remind y'all, I'm just a guy on YouTube. I've never gone to culinary school, so I'm obviously not an expert on teaching this stuff, and you're really just watching me to get a good idea on things you might be able to add to your own cooking repertoire, I guess, for lack of better words. But I did want to also, remind y'all safety things, especially for people that are new, Since this will be cooking on the stovetop, obviously there's going to be fire. This is a gas stove. There's going to be heat, no touching of the pans directly, or the metal things that they rest on. All that stuff can get hot. So if you're going in here cooking for the first time, remember there's a lot of heat involved. And you don't need to be afraid of the fire. You just need to respect it. This includes if things could go wrong. And I'm not going to cover all that stuff. I am going to begin by covering, two of these. So, cooking an omelet, your goal is, of course, going to be to pretty much cook all the egg without, overcooking one part of the egg. You want to make a kind of egg pancake. So that's going to involve flipping. That can be done with a single pan, although the egg omelets I make are kind of a little big. So that's why I have two pans. I'm going to do a two-pan flip method. This will probably be good for anybody else out there who might be doing this for the first time and doesn't have, they aren't used to the flip. So ingredient preparation, of course, begins with the eggs, which are the other thing we have to be careful out. Hopefully most of y'all already know that eggs are a well-known vector for food-related poisonings. So make sure you respect eggs. I'm getting some egg yolk on my fingers here, and I will be very careful and make sure I wash my fingers with soap once I get this here and started. But I wanted to give you all other reminders. If you're going to be handling the egg, you're going to get egg whites on you in some form or another. And I think you've also noticed I have two forks out. This is one of the precautions I take in order to make sure, I'm sorry this is taking a while. I was hoping I would mix them while doing this, but I'm putting these eggs away because I don't like them to stay out too long. So I have two forks because I'm going to use one to eat. I'm going to use the other to whisk these. Now you could use an actual whisk for it. That would probably do a much better job. But I like to do this in a way that allows me to do this possibly multiple days in a row. And I only have one whisk, usually you do. And so just getting used to whisking with a fork is good. As you can see from the quantity, I went with 3 jumbo eggs. If I'm going down a size to large, I do 4 large eggs. So as you can see, the omelets will be kind of big. If you're used to omelets, I think they're a little bigger than normal. Strategy I'm using here is basically, you're trying to go up and over and kind of smash stuff on the base, and I'm changing directions every once in a while so that parts of the egg that are remaining stagnant get mixed in. The best goal, the ideal goal would be for the eggs to be one solid color, but that's fine. That'll do. So preparing your ingredients ahead of time is a really good idea for omelets, just because you will be cooking the eggs, of course, and those will cook fast. So once you get to that part, you pretty much need everything to come together. Fortunately, it's not that hard to kind of plan in advance. I think of omelets in terms of 3 stages. So the last stage is obviously the eggs cooking, and you can put a lot of things in there. You can put some cheese in there. You can put your seasoning in there. You could also add maybe some vegetables, some meats, or something like that. But the eggs are going to be last, and those eggs will cook fast. The step before that is actually what my vegetables here. I've got spinach and I've got some bell peppers already prepared for me to just use right out of the thing by my local grocery store. Nice and convenient. These will actually cook really fast. but they are better when cooked. Spinach in particular becomes a lot more edible when it crumples up and becomes, you know, cooked spinach basically. And I think bell peppers get softened. When they're softened, they're pretty good. But the three-stage part, the first stage is stuff that takes a little bit longer to cook that you might have to cook separately or in advance. And in my case, that's just hash browns for potatoes, but this could also include cooking some sausage in advance or bacon in advance or something like that, which, you know, is kind of similar to putting it in the eggs, but it's something to consider. You could say there's a fourth stage where you're doing stuff with cheese at the very end, but I don't consider that a stage, so make of that what you will. So you can see I've got all my ingredients already prepared here. The butter I've already pre-chopped. I'm going to use about 2 tablespoons of butter, but you know, it doesn't have to be butter. It could be plenty of different kinds of oils. But I like butter. I've got that prepared, so let's get cooking. So, you know, like I said, to begin with, since the potatoes are the things that kind of take the longest to cook, those go first. I begin with a nice simple little layer of these hash browns. They're unflavored, just simple potatoes. And fortunately, because they're really thin like this, they will cook pretty well. What I've done with my butter is I've divided them up into 2 slightly 1 tablespoon things, and also 1 small sliver for this other pan over here. We will get this started. As you can see, you know, this is a gas stove, so I had to get the fire lit with the click. I'm putting it to a medium-high. Hands are a little bit buttery, so, you know, I'm going to give those a little wash. But fortunately, with hash browns this thin, the butter's pretty much going to be what I use to determine, you know, how to keep cooking. You'll notice I'm using a plastic spatula. I guess it's a spoon. The rubber spatula melted at these temperatures, so they're not really good for this. But for what I do, it's pretty simple. As you can see, this butter's already starting to melt a little bit, so what I'm doing is trying to spread it to areas of the pan it hasn't been before. I'm moving the hash browns to fill those locations. The idea here is to coat the pan, coat the potatoes, you know, with butter. It's getting nice and hot and sizzly very quick. And I'm going to have to keep moving and just keep talking as I go. But again, the good news is with hash browns these thin, I don't have to worry about these cooking for a long time. Worst case, they're not brown, but usually they are a little browned and pretty good for hash browns, especially hash browns inside an omelet. And the main thing I lament here is because it's a fresh bar of butter, just the way the edges were set up, this isn't quite as much butter as I go with this, but I do usually choose the bigger one for this first step. And now the butter, you know, I've been mixing the piece of butter around, and now it's all gone. All of these are coated, so now I'm flattening them to let these continue to cook some more. And that's where I turn this one on during the cook. And I'm leaving this one at a lower temperature of a 3. So 7 is a medium high, 3 is a medium low. We're going to put a small bit of spinach on here. You'll probably be putting a little more spinach than you initially think you need in there, just because, you know, that looks like quite a bit of spinach, but it's actually going to, again, cook down real quick. Yeah, good. I look for weird spots on the spinach. It all looks pretty edible, pre-cooked. We're just going to spread some bell pepper on top. I feel like maybe that's about enough. You know, you'll kind of get used to whatever you want to do. Take the final piece of butter, put it on there for now, because, you know, that hand going into all those vegetables is a little messy. But now the goal is to get this butter down to the pan, and then to kind of move it around like before, but try to mop it up with the new veggies I just added, especially the spinach. Because now my goal, because those potatoes have been on the very hot surface for a very long time, my goal now is to try and make sure these vegetables get cooked before everything finishes cooking here, especially since some of the hash browns are already browned. These temperatures are pretty high. You could probably do it a little bit colder, lower, in order to, you know, cook things a little slower. But as you can see, that spinach is already crinkled up, and now I'm just flattening things out because we are already on to the egg part. See, this goes pretty quick. Turning it down to medium, that's a 5 on cooking. And over here, we're just spreading the butter out. I don't think I need the butter over here, but I've always done this, and if it does anything to the flavor, it's interesting. So the reason this one is at 3 is I'm just trying to make that one accumulate some heat. We take the eggs, I'll do one final whisk, and I'm just going to pour them in the middle and let them spread out. That's pretty good. We're going to have to go fast, but before we do that, I'm going to put this in the sink and turn the hot water on. Takes my hot water a bit too. But yeah, so here I am. First, I'm mixing it up a little bit in the middle to try and, almost like it's a scramble, except in this case, my goal is to just kind of disturb the egg, get the egg underneath the default stuff, and now we're going to start finding edges, pulling them inward, and getting egg from the top underneath. This encourages less burnage, so there's more eggs being cooked and less already cooked eggs being cooked even more. My goal here is to just kind of go in a circle around it. You know, I'm pushing materials back into place-ish to, you know, encourage the ingredients to be spread out a bit. But we are starting to get a little lower on egg material here. In fact, that's probably getting pretty close. It looks like a very sloppy, sludgy surface instead of like a mess of eggs. It's almost more swamp-like. Now here's where I'm going to move it a little bit, make sure it's loose. And now it's time to do a pan flip. And you just, nice and quick. This is a chance to investigate how you did. Some of these eggs look a little more cooked than they need to, but I'm a little bit risky with my cooking. I won't be flipping it twice. I think the heat just ended up being a little warm, but it's okay. At this point, you know, this is nice and about where I want it to be. It's cooking nice and fast, so we're transferring it back to the first pan. Since I'm only doing the one flip, we'll just do this for just a tiny bit longer. And now comes the final part, getting it folded and cheese on the inside. So I'm right-handed. I'll be holding this with my right hand, which means I will take this cheese and I will fill the left-hand side, maybe with just a little bit more right there. That's really good. And now you just get it to slide a little bit, and then at the halfway point, flip it. Nice and simple. But we're not done yet. Let's go over here, get that pointed down, because as you can see, it's nice and steaming hot. We're going to take advantage of this opportunity to cover it with cheese. So if you chose a bigger plate than this, then you won't be making as big of a cheese mess. In fact, you can take some of the cheese from down here and move it up there, although that is surprisingly little spilled cheese on the plate. Usually I'm a little more... Ah yes, I kind of forgot to talk about the sort of cheese I'm using. So this is a Mexican blend. It's basically cheddar and 3 other whitish cheeses, I guess. It's pretty good. I do suggest, you know, if you're not going to do that, you don't go completely heavy on the cheddar. At least if you have a recipe like this that is light on the light on, you know, it uses lighter ingredients. Anyways, as you can see over here, we've got the sink nice and running. The idea is, yeah, I'm starting to see some of the heat there. We want the cheese in the omelet and on the top of the omelet to melt, and this is a brief opportunity to do your dishes. Why? So that so those ones aren't as important, they're just a pain, but this allows me to kind of get these into a state where I can use them again tomorrow or Wednesday or Thursday. Yeah, I think Wednesday is when I'm going to do it. So you can see there's a lot of steam coming up. So this was the big pan that was on the low heat, and then this one was turned off first, and you can see it's already really hot, or it's still really hot. So this is part of needing to be careful. But the hot water from the sink should help clean most of the grease out, and then you use something like this to knock any particles. If I feel comfortable with just that amount, but if you want to be really safe, you can just put a dash of dish soap, probably after it is clean, because you can cook the dish soap. And then I like to clean it off with a paper towel, just because, or dry it off with a paper towel, just because you're not going to pick up weird flavors from it. So this is the one that was on the hotter plate. I'm washing this one second because this one was hotter, and it's gotten more of a chance to cool down now. This one, you definitely need the scrubber, because as this one did most of the real cooking and had the cheese in it at the end especially, this one has a tendency to, you know, be the messier of the two. But, you know, make sure you get that rinsed off. I'm being very careful with this paper towel. You know, basically, I don't use the same side over, and I try not to have the side that was on face down. You may also want to consider cleaning any utensils that you have to reuse. So this only gets used once, and egg does get on it, so don't want it to kind of sit around and purge bad whatevers, bad bacteria, germs, bugs. So give that stuff a little scrub. And then I still have the middle part of this nice and dry, so let's... There. As you can see, this is part of it. The only thing I haven't done here for y'all that I normally do is I haven't put my ingredients away. But that's because with the camera in the way, that's kind of hard. But you can kind of see over here, the omelet is already, you know, the cheese is already pretty melted, and that was, you know, nice and quick. Oh, I can turn this off now. And now comes the most important part of the video. This is a lesson I've learned from a lot of anime, and that is, you should always eat your own cooking. And I think for y'all need to see me eat at least part of it. Just because, you know, that cheese is nice and stretchy. Just because you need to see whether or not this came out right this time, so that y'all can judge it right. Of course, it's hard to go wrong with that much cheese. The butter is a little lighter than it normally is. But again, you know, I kind of expected that. If we take a look, you can kind of see it's actually cooked all the way through about what you would want. Sometimes doing it this way, it can come out a little bit flowy in the middle, and I'm okay with that. The hash browns came out right. You might have noticed I didn't mention any seasonings. Really the only seasoning in here would be in the butter. It's salted butter, so you know, otherwise I didn't add much else. I'm a very vanilla person, so I like things with, I call them subtle flavors, but you know, with this much cheese, it's not that subtle, is it? Yeah, this came out pretty good. So one of the things that makes up for the fact that the there isn't quite as much butter in here as normal, you know, just a tiny little bit. The hash browns, they don't always brown through, but this time they brown through just about right. And of course, you know, you could consider it cheating by putting so much cheese on there, but maybe there's some valuable skill in this video in terms of people being able to see how I get the cheese in the middle of the fold, see how I put the cheese on top of the omelet. And who knows, hopefully you looked at this and you said, oh yeah, that's not too bad. Because as you can see, the kitchen's already pretty clean. In between the cuts, I put the dishes away, or not the dishes, the ingredients away. You know, just tie them up, close them up. I had already done most of that, but you know, I finished all of that, put them in the fridge, and then I fired this up. My dishes are all ready to go to make another batch. Well, I guess technically it's tomorrow. I am recording this Tuesday at 1 a.m., so it is pretty early. This is my before I go to bed snack dinner, I guess. This omelet is obviously big enough to be a meal in itself, especially for some people. 3 jumbo eggs or 4 large eggs are pretty numerous. And yeah, I guess I forgot to take a look, but it looked like from the flip, it did not seem like the eggs had been too browned. You know, I cooked it nice and fast. That can be something that can be kind of hard to estimate unless you practice a bit. So you can begin by scrambling some eggs and getting a good feel for, oh yeah, those eggs are probably cooked by now. Seriously, if this video didn't give you an impression that eggs cook fast, try cooking some scrambled eggs. It's pretty fast. The longest part is usually the preparation of the eggs themselves, just, you know, whisking them like that. But yeah, for anime stuff, I kind of expected today to potentially be light. There was nothing that came out on May 12th that I didn't already have, which basically means that the only stuff that would arrive would be stuff that shipped at a weird date, except everything from Amazon ships at a weird date now. So the May 12th stuff arrives May 19th, the May 19th arrives May, and usually it's actually May 12th stuff arrives May 13th, the May 19th stuff arrives May 20th. We got 4 more bites here. Again, some of the stuff in the bottom there where the hash browns are a little doubled on themselves, that's kind of my favorite part of this specific omelet. It's interesting because I've got the numbers that I use down pat on the stove, but they don't always seem to cook the same. But that's good for this video because it meant that the hash browns cooked pretty quick. Yeah, that's the way I like my omelets. They're maybe not the healthiest. There's a good amount of butter instead of another healthy oil. And you do have to be careful because some of the higher temperatures can make healthy oils, I think, transform into some of the unhealthy oil variants. And you could probably cook a lot of that stuff at a lower temperature if you really needed to. The trickiness is mostly getting used to the timing, I think. And I guess if it's slow enough, maybe there's a risk of overcooking. But as long as you kind of recognize you're in that territory, you can usually do just fine. I mean, I did notice after I flipped the omelet that there was some browning that did not appear to be just the hash browns. There was also, it looked like some eggs started turning a little bit in that direction. But usually if you recognize you're starting to go down that path, moving forward helps. And in the case of an omelet, if it looks like you're really messing up and you just can't flip it, turn it into scrambled eggs really quick. So there we go. Now all I have to do is edit this video. I hope this comes out okay, because I knew once it got to the point where I had to cook, I had to talk fast. So hopefully y'all can pick up on that. I'll try to include the recipe in the description. Otherwise, y'all have a nice week.